because FanDuel is the official sports betting of the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show. You guys know I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer and fewer games, and the sports just don't sports like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going anytime I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets when I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com/UCSS and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball and the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show. And with that, we welcome in ESPN Baseball expert analyst Tim Kurkjian to the show. Tim, how you doing today?
Well, fellas, how you doing?
Doing great, Tim. We appreciate you taking the time.
You have to ask him the question that we just had.
What?
You definitely got to ask him.
Well, let me ease him into it here.
Okay.
First of all, Tim, I worked with your son Jeff at the radio station. I worked at the sports station for many years, and he was, of course, a DJ here in Cleveland. So I know you say he's in Vegas. Is he still in Vegas, or has he moved on to something else?
Yeah, he is in Philadelphia now.
Oh.
He's at XTU. He does the morning show there with
Nice.
Andy Summers, and he's doing great. And he and I have our own baseball father-son podcast. Runs every Tuesday. So yeah, it's like a dream come true doing a podcast with your own son.
Did you, my son, who's young, he's 11. He's shown some interest, not in sports, but he's interested in entertaining and comedy and stuff like that. And I always wonder, like, how much I should push it when he brings it to me. Did your son, was that something that he brought to you and then you just embraced it, that he wanted to be in entertainment as well?
Of course. He was the star of all the school plays in high school, as opposed to playing baseball, basketball like Dad, and his sister was a great player. He said, I want to be on stage, and he was the star of all the shows. And he just had a presence to him even when he was 5 years old. He could entertain people with singing and dancing and everything else. So he's always wanted to do that. When I was a kid, all I ever did was watch baseball games. He was watching, whose line is it anyway? He was watching, and that's how he became. And I must tell you, it has really helped him. That skill that you have out in front of people, he will have that skill for the rest of his life, whereas a lot of good high school ball players and baseball players that can't do much anymore with that skill.
That's a fair point. Tim, on a non-family, non-sports related question, we were having a debate before, and we want your take on this because obviously you're famous. You're out. I was just saying earlier that I actually saw you randomly. I didn't want to bother you, but I was in Florida over the winter, and I saw you in a restaurant. I noticed you there. I didn't come up, obviously, because I didn't want to bother you. But so you're a celebrity. People see you. They know who you are. We were talking before about if you see a famous woman, in this case we were talking about Halle Berry because she's from Cleveland. My man G. Bush here says, well, I can't just walk up and talk to her. That's not good. But if his wife is there, then it's okay to talk to her. Do you think it's not okay just in a harmless way to talk to a famous female celebrity if that opportunity arises? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, you can do it, but I'm not going to do that. I would be petrified around Halle Berry. She makes me look like a pile of inner tubes. So I don't think we're in the same. One day at ESPN, this was horrible. This is about 15 years ago. Jessica Alba was in line in front of me in the cafeteria. And she turned around and said hello, and I'm so embarrassed. I had no idea who she was. I told my then son, Jeffrey, age 15, I stood behind Jessica Alba in line. I didn't even know who she was. And he said, Dad, what is wrong with you? Well, obviously, there's a lot wrong with me. No, I would not go up to Halle Berry. I would be too scared.
He melted. He melted in the lunch line. He melted. I can't do it. I had nothing.
Tim, let's get to the Guardians here. We do want to talk about the draft. We're talking more about baseball draft is usually not a big deal. Obviously, it's gotten bigger in the last few years. We will get to that in a minute, but it's like a double focus right now. The Guardians have been way better than we expected at the start of the season. They're struggling a little bit right now, but they still have the best record in the American League. and fans are anxious because we're used to the starting pitching being good, and there being question marks with the rest of the team. Right now, the lineup's been good, the defense is excellent, the bullpen's been great, but the starting rotation, Tim, is a mess. This team needs to get starting pitching, and the fans are worried that the Guardians will not make an aggressive trade to get at least one pitcher. How do you feel 18 days or so before the deadline? Do you think they will be aggressive and get some starting pitching?
I do. I don't know if they're going to get it because every other team out there, including the Yankees and the Dodgers, are going to be looking for starting pitching. And with only 5, 6, maybe 7 teams at the most that are going to be sellers because everyone's in the playoff race, I just don't know how the Guardians are going to outbid, say, the Dodgers or the Yankees for Crochet or whoever you want to talk about who might be available. But yes, I agree. The Guardians got something really good going on. I had no idea they were going to be this good. I had no idea their offense would score this many runs. But they need another starting pitcher because you get people interested like this. You can't tease them at 57 and 35 and then not do anything.
Right.
At the trade deadline. I think they will try to do it. But again, there are a lot of other teams trying to do the exact same thing, and those teams have more money and more resources.
Well, Tim, you say more money and more resources. I always ask Bull, I said, okay, if you want an arm, you got to give something to get something. Do you believe that the Guardians have enough prospects to say go out and bid for some of these people? Do they have enough to make their deal a little sweeter than some of the other teams who may have more money?
Yeah, they have a pretty good farm system, but it's not the Dodger farm system, and it sure isn't the Orioles farm system. And the Orioles need a starting pitcher maybe more than anyone if they're going to get to October, which they are, and then do something in October. So when you stack up the Indians' prospects against some of these bigger teams with better farm systems, I don't like the Guardians' chances of going up against Baltimore or the Dodgers to get somebody. And when you're still a developmental team like the Guardians are, you got to be careful with those draft picks because you're not in the same position that the Dodgers can be where they can trade people away and then still have all the money they need to go get what they want.
Tim, you said that you had no idea that the Guardians would be this good and that they would score this many runs. So clearly, I think to a degree, it's safe to say they've overachieved so far this season. How would you assess rookie manager Steven Vogt? I think he's a strong personality, strong leader of men. But how do you see him?
I think he's great. I wrote a 4,000-word story for ESPN.com in spring training about Steven Vogt. And I was writing more about what a playful baseball lifer that is. But in researching the story, the season hadn't even begun yet. We were 2 weeks into spring training. And Matt Muncy of the Dodgers told me, Steven Vogt's the best teammate I ever had, and I fully believe that someday he will be a Hall of Fame manager. This is before he ever managed a game. And I probably talked to 20 people about Steven Vogt, and one person said anything different than, we all knew he was going to be a manager. We all knew he was going to be great at this because of his personality, his communication skills, his people skills. Fellas, this is why Tito Francona was so good. He could look you in the eye and tell you the truth. And even if it hurt, he could make it palatable, and that's what Steven Vogt can do. He's the manager of the year in the American League this year because he has done a sensational job. He only coached in the major leagues for 1 year and never managed.
Yeah, it is remarkable. Tim, going back to the pitching, as you said, there's not a lot of teams necessarily selling right. See what happens. I thought the Cubs were about to become sellers. Now they've won some 7. Maybe Toronto's a seller now. They have some interesting pitchers. Maybe Tampa Bay. Even if they can't get the top of the market in terms of pitchers, I think it's important, if nothing else, to try to grab some rental innings eaters just to be able to make it through the regular season and not burn out the bullpen, if nothing else, because then you could overuse the bullpen in the playoffs, which is their strength. So at the very least, I hope they do that. Is that reasonable?
Yes, that's reasonable. Like someone like Eric Fetty of the White Sox is not a great pitcher, but he's had a very good year, and he's a veteran, and he could eat up some innings. So that's what maybe they should be focusing on. Chris Bassett of the Blue Jays is really good. I don't know if they're going to sell. They still think they have a chance to make the playoffs. And, of course, that's the problem right now. Almost every team is in the same boat right now. And when the Diamondbacks proved last year you can sneak in with 84 wins, get hot in October, and get to the World Series, everyone is still looking at that. And that's why this trade deadline is going to be so tricky.
Do you think they should push back the trade deadline? I was talking today. I thought they should push it back to maybe August 15th. We know they used to have the two trade deadlines. They got rid of it. Do you think they'll consider moving it back a little bit?
They might, because now with the new rules, once you do the trade deadline, you can't make any moves from August the 1st till, the end of the season. So sure, maybe that makes more sense. But the way I have to look at it is I want the player that I acquire for as long as I possibly can. Mm-hmm. You are renting him for 2 months. If you push it back to August the 15th, now you're down to 6 weeks of a guy. You're going to give up a top prospect for a 6-week rental? That makes it even riskier.
Hey, Tim, you look at Jose Ramirez making another start at third base for the American League All-Star team. He's clearly going to be in the MVP race again this year. I asked this question on social media a couple of days ago. Kind of was a silly question, but in your opinion, when you look at the franchise history of the Cleveland Guardians, how far off is Jose Ramirez from being on that Mount Rushmore?
Mount Rushmore of the Indians. Well, unfortunately, I'm 67 years old, so we have to go way back with Bob Feller's got to be number one. Earl Averill's in there from way back. So Mount Rushmore is probably a little too early for Jose Ramirez, especially with all those great Indians that came through with Manny and Tomey and Alomar and all that. But point is, this guy's staying there for a long time, and let's give him another 5 years, and maybe he'll be on that list. I am I am dazzled every day by how good that guy is. And every year he's the same player. And sometimes he doesn't even have any help in the lineup. This year is different, and he still produces. So I don't think he's a Mount Rushmore guy yet, but someday he might be.
Tim, if you look at the roster is very young. You look at Kwan. He's another young guy. Good glove. He was flirting with 400 for a while. You look at some of the other people. He just mentioned Jose Ramirez. In 5 years, if you look at this roster, which person on this roster, whether they're with the Guardians or somebody else, will be the best player?
Well, that's a great question. I am dazzled also by Steven Kwan, because I'll put him down because I think the game that he plays is going to last. Fellas, he's got 22 walks and 23 strikeouts this season. You know how many guys strike out 23 times in a month? Like 100 guys strike out 23 or more times in a month. And he's got that for the season. His bat-to-ball skills are like Luis Arraez-like, and so few other guys in the big leagues play this way. So when you find a guy whose values getting a hit, not necessarily hitting a home run, and puts the ball in play and puts his bat on the ball and doesn't strike out, that guy has lasting power. So Steven Kwan will be the best player on this team in 5 years.
Tim, I recently compared Emanuel Clase. I said he reminds me a little of Lee Smith. He would come in and big dude. He was intimidating. And I feel like Emanuel Clase. Are you buying that comparison at all?
Well, he's not as big as Lee Smith. Lee Smith is one of the biggest men I've ever seen in my life. And Lee Smith, by the way, used to take a nap in the first 4 innings of the game, and then he would walk out to the bullpen to get ready for what was going to be another closing situation, Hall of Fame closer. But Clase has been unbelievable. I mean, his ERA is 0.83. He's arguably been the best relief pitcher in the major leagues this year, and we can go back several years, and he's going to be in that conversation. And that's, again, why the Guardians are so dangerous, is they play the game differently than most other teams. Their bullpen is loaded, and they have a guy who can go 1, 2, 3 in the ninth.
Yep.
Tim, I'm not like my man Bull here. I'm more so of a casual baseball fan. But this season, I found myself watching more games that involve teams that doesn't include the Cleveland Guardians. You've been around this game for a long time. In your opinion, what has MLB done to draw more interest to the casual fan?
Well, the pitch clock really helped. I don't think there's any doubt about that. We cut a half an hour off the games last year, and that was a half an hour of dead time. And I think it worked. I wasn't sure it's going to work, but I'm glad it worked. A lot of these other rule changes I can live without. But to me, the reason people are starting to get interested again is the talent level in the major leagues is just ridiculously high. Just look at the All-Star team this year, 32 first-time All-Stars this year. 17 of them are pitchers. So when you look at Paul Skeens and Ellie De La Cruz and Gunnar Henderson and Bobby Witt Jr. and Mason Miller, all first-time All-Stars, those guys are going to carry the All-Star team for the next 10 years. That's to me why baseball is starting to make a resurgence. Ever since Harper and Trout came in the game 10, 12 years ago, that's when the game started this influx of amazingly young, athletic, strong, fast kids who get here earlier than ever. And when they get here, they are breathtaking to watch.
And a perfect follow-up to that, of course, last thing, Tim, is the draft, right? Bazana and Condon seem to be the top two guys on the board. We'll see. There's been talk about J.J. Weatherholt, but I think it's going to come down to Bazana and Condon. They're both players that could be in the big leagues, maybe even by September, certainly by next year, putting up huge numbers, obviously, in college. What are you hearing? What do you think the Guardians are going to do with this first pick in the draft?
Okay, I think that's going to be one of the two, and you're asking me to guess. So I'm going to guess it's going to be Charlie Condon. He's an outfielder. He can play third base. He's from, obviously, just like Bazana, he's from a huge program. He's got great power, and everyone's looking for power these days, of course. And if you hit the ball out of the ballpark, you got a chance. And so that's where I think the Guardians will go. But this draft, I'm told, and I'm by no means a draft expert, trust me, it's different than a lot. I mean, it's really unclear after the first couple guys who it is. But I think it'll be Charlie Condon to the Guardians.
Do you think there's any chance he's in the big leagues before the end of this season?
I would guess no, but I didn't expect Paul Skeens. I knew Paul Skeens would be in the big leagues this early. I didn't know he would be this good. And there's the lesson, fellas. These guys are rushed to the big leagues faster than ever to make up. So everyone sees this is our big investment. Let's go. Let's bring them in. Yeah. And so I would say no to this year, but all bets are off with the drafts these days.
Tim, we appreciate the time. Thank you so much for spending it with us. All the best to you and to Jeff, your son. I'm glad he's doing well, and we'll talk to you again. Thanks.
And Tim, plug the podcast.
Okay,
where can people hear
Yes.
you and your son's podcast?
Yes.
Is this a great game or what? You can find it. And I'm so bad at this, I don't even understand how it works. It's on all this Spotify's and all that stuff. That's what my son does. He takes care of all that. I just provide the content.
There you go. Apple Pods. I'm sure it's on Apple Pods and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
We appreciate it,
On
Tim.
everything.
Thank you.
All right, fellas.
All right.
Take care.